So, hello everyone, and welcome to the lecture about Java Mission Control. My name is Adnan, and I'm Senior Software Engineer at Tacta. And today I will just go briefly over what's present in Java Mission Control, what can you do with that regarding your applications. So, let's just briefly go over the history. Java Mission Control is real-time profiling and diagnostic tool, and also it can record analysis of your application. It contains from two parts, JMX console and flight recorder. So it was released back in Java 7, update 40, and since then it was part of JDK up to Java 11. When Oracle decided to drop it from the commercial usage and make it publicly available as open source. So from Java 11 you can actually use it for free in production. Before you could only use it for free on test environment locally on your machines, but for the production you would require license. So what I'm going to talk about today or present is Java Mission Control version 6, the last one last release, and currently as part of Open JDK, currently the version 7 is developed. Currently it's available as the you can download the pre-release versions, but I mean it's not quite yet recommended to use it in production until there's a stable release. So version 6 is present since Java 9. You can also use it for monitoring older versions of Javas, so it doesn't have any limitations regarding that. The only limitation you have is if you're using flight recorder and you record your application. On a newer version of flight recorder you cannot open it in older versions, but regarding everything else is quite compatible inter versions. So well, okay, so let's first see what we have here. Inside, when you open the Java Mission Control, which is present inside the here, for example, I opened one from the version 10. It's present inside the bin folder, and for the new version from the version 7, you need to download it from the OpenJDK website. So after you open the Java Mission Control JMC, you can see this JVM browser where you can, when it out-discovers every application locally run. As you can see, there are some Maven. It can also detect itself and my locally running application as well as IntelliJ. If you decide to connect to some remotely application on your server, then you have the connection options. When you just decide where to connect, enter the IP address and port. Let's see. It's also very recommended that you have dedicated port for JMX. And of course, if you are connected to the production, it's always recommended to set up username and password. But if it's not exposed to outer world, you can just use it without that overhead. And of course, there's test connection options to test it. But anyway, we are connected to the blank server. So after that, you can get that listed here. And you can add multiple instances of your application, and even you can make it create folders or like this, and then group those connections to the folder, and that easier to navigate if you have a lot of instances. So of course you can always save everything that you configured here. So okay, that's regarding the connections. Now let's connect to our application running locally on my laptop. So as I said before, we have the JMX console and bin server, and the flight recorder. So MB server is for live monitoring of your application, so real-time analysis and diagnostics, and also it allows interaction with your application. So when you open the MB server, first thing you see is this overview page, where you have certain dashboard and some graphs. Okay, this page is mostly intended for visual monitoring, and you can also use it for, let's say, we often have these monitors on our walls, and we have constantly running JMCs, and which always shows there, so we can detect. We can always look at the application, how it behaves and stuff like that. So by default, you get those 3 dashes for the heap memory, for the CPU usage and live set fragmentation, and for the processor and memory graphs. But you can also add your own. So, but the thing is where those data comes from. It comes from the list of MBeans, so management beans, that are available inside your for your application and for your local JVM or JVM where you connected. So by default, it will detect everything that's registered in MBean server. So and it will the list of everything that's available will be listed here. By default, there are several things here that comes with the JVM, and but if you use certain libraries, certain tools, etc. inside your application, they will be also available. For instance, since this is run on Tomcat, you have certain MBeans that are inside the Tomcat, and you can also create your own MBean servers, MBeans, and register them to MBean server, and then they will be available here. So, for example, in my application, there's certain cache, and I created MBean class that will interact with this cache, either to show how many data is there, or even to interact like restart cache or stuff like that. So let's see, first of all, some default, like for the memory. So as you can see, it will list every attribute that's present there, and with the update, which will be, this data will be updated. Will be updated. How do you decide? So you have the update interval. You can change how often you want to update this value. For some it has sense, for some none, but it's up to you what you want with this. And you, of course, you have operations, what's present in inside that MB. For memory, we have we have operation that will notify GC to start. I mean, so if you select which operation you want, if you click execute, it will start. It will actually ask the GC to start. And you can see that it started and cleaned some memory. How do you actually register MB? It's since this is a Spring Boot application that I have here, it's quite easy with Spring. You just need to declare manage resource class and add certain either management attribute or management operation annotations, and it will be present. Of course, you need to scan inside the main class and to enable ambient export, so you can scan for your inside your application whatever is registered as managed resource. So after that, it will be available here. For everything, for other resources, you will require more additional work. So luckily, we have Spring Boot, which is quite easy to use. And so, as I said before, we have certain operations there. So, as I added here, like get size of the cache and get all values. So, when you decide to execute, you can do it here. You can get the results here, or after that, you can save them and use them for some other things. And you can, of course, create your own application or your own extensions of JMC or plugins, especially now when it's open source, so you can interact more with certain operations you created. But for now, we have just some general items like for overview, we can actually add a new graph that will monitor the size of the cache. So if we go to that, we actually add the size. Let's try to make it a little bit bigger, so it should be. As soon as I interact with the application, especially the part that adds certain stuff inside the cache, you can see it shall show growth. So again, this is pretty much the most important part of the MB server. So the listing of MBs and interaction, either for monitoring or actually executing certain operations. Of course, beside that, there is live notification options, so you can also make sure that not only that you need to interact with the application, rather than the application also interact with your running JMC or MB server. So another interesting part of live MB server is triggering. So you want to have certain notifications if something bad happens, and what's bad is up to you to decide. So by default, you have listed here several options like monitor CPU if it gets too high, do some certain action, and of course as you can see, nothing is actually turned on. So turning it on is quite easy, of course, and you have now it will show now which rules which are the rules for the notification to happen. As you can see, currently what's monitoring is the CPU usage, which is quite very low, and the notification will be triggered when actually it goes to 90%. Since this doesn't have any chance to go to the 90, we'll make it lower, and we want to happen if it's longer than 1 second, we want to have it happens. So should be by now. Okay, so besides that, you have options what will happen. You can either have application alerts, so certain pop-up appears on your monitor, or you can either print inside the console, or you can even start flight recorder, and you can decide how long, and other options like heap dump, or even the most used one is actually to send email to whoever you want to get this information. So besides actually having these default ones, you can also add your own based on the available MBs. So especially if you have your own MBs, you can also add them here, and they will be triggered when rules are met. So you can probably, for some reason it doesn't start. Strange. Anyway, so besides triggering, there is, okay, of course you'll have live monitoring of the system informations, JVM informations, certain statistics. You can also add what else you want to monitor from available JVM MBs, and of course listing of the system properties, and you can lively interact with the application by adding or changing or deleting existing systems properties. And I guess, yeah. Next tab is memory. So Since this is quite overhead for the Java mission control, it's not triggered automatically. Generally, intention of JMC is to have a low impact on your application. So most of the items that will not impact on your application are automatically turned on when you start things, but certain operations will cause certain problems for your application, or might cause a problem for your application. They are not turned on automatically, so you need to trigger them manually. So if you want to do such operation, notification or warning will show up. So let's not do that. Actually, we can do so. It will scan for a heap and show what's there, which kind of classes are initiated, or how much size of memory they're taking. So pretty much profiling of the heap, basic profiling of heap in the moment when you refreshed. And if you're constantly doing that, it also shows a certain progress over the time. So basically this is quite mostly viewed as a table, but you can also add your own plugins or create your own plugins or have your own application that will render this data in a more viewable form. Besides that, you have information about garbage collector, how much time it took, how much time it started since you start monitoring. So in this case, it have the total, and you have the total number of GC collections count, or how much it lasted. So quite useful information if you have problems with the garbage collector and you need to tune it. And of course, you have information about memory pool, how many things are there, how much memory is spent on certain part of the memory pools. Quite useful. We had issues before with the memory leaks, and monitoring this tab had helped us solve problems, especially because certain things will not show up inside the logs, or it's almost impossible to show up on the logs or the other ways. So we need to monitor it. We need to monitor the application and constantly look at the heap and render what's going on there, what exists there, what's initiated mostly, and by that we could figure it out what's going on there. So quite useful tab. Of course, then the next one is regarding threads, especially if you have problems with threads, this is place for you. And you can see here the full list of the threads inside your application. Of course, it's always useful that you name your threads if you are controlling them, and so it's easier to navigate here. By default, you don't see here how much CPU is using or how much memory is allocating, but you can turn it on. Turn it on here, and you can have here on the list of the whole threads here, especially if you have larger applications, thousands of threads. It's quite harder to navigate here, but you have search here. So in such applications, it's always recommended to have certain naming convention for threads. If you select certain thread, you will notice the stack trace for that thread, so you can see from where it originates, and especially if it's some certain threads that are blocked, or you can hear them sorted them out by the state and look it up from. I mean, you can then just figure it out what's going on. Okay, so the last tab is diagnostic commands, which has certain operations. The green ones will not impact your application for much. The yellow ones will have medium impact, and the red one is not recommended if you don't know what you are doing with that, especially GMT. So only for those who are dealing with debuggers. So this will be the overview of the MB server. So many useful items. As you can see, I have additional tab G-console plugin. So this is something that I took from the list of the available plugins. If you need something else, you can get it from this place here. So inside the help, you have install new software, and all right, I don't have internet here, so sorry. Anyway, you will have the list of the necessary plugins, available plugins here. Certain are maintained, certain are still not maintained, so it's not quite recommended if you are not sure what you're doing. So that's it regarding the live monitoring. Additional thing that's the second part of the JMC is the flight recorder. So this one will collect the data from your application, and by that also from JVM and from the system that for the information for the system related to your application JVM. So starting is quite easy. I mean, everything that I'm showing is, based on the GUI from the JMC. You can also do everything that I showed you with by scripting or by console. So you can find on the internet commands for such operations. So when you decide to start flight recorder, you have you get this option, this view here, and you can decide where to place that file, how to name this recording, how long you want to record, and especially if you are working with larger application and you might have issues with the memory, because collection of the data can be quite large, so you can also do certain you can limit it to a certain size or certain components, and also you have additional configurations if you want to actually collect data from the garbage collector, and many other options here. So especially regarding the thread dumps and the exception handling, if you do not need it in your, if you do not want to monitor it right away, I do not recommend to have a smaller sampling. So rather go with every 60 seconds, 10 seconds, and just get errors or something like that. But if you have a lot of problem exception, then include this one. This can have a little impact on your application if you are rendering everything. And of course, you can select different options that are present inside the flight recorder that's present on the server that you are using. So after that, you just click finish, and it will collect the data. All right, and that trigger we started before decided to show up. Okay, so I'll stop here, and we do not want to lose too much time. Also, you can get, if you have saved the recording, you can actually open that pretty much from this here. From the version 6, you get this automated analysis. So it will render certain information or give you certain information if something is okay or not. So you can only, from the start, you can focus on something that's end up being read. So or you can just hide everything that's fine, and then you get the listing what's wrong, and you can then focus your investigation on that. So quite neat one. This is not present in Mission Control 5, and they have certain planning to make it this much better in the future with the version 7, especially with version, I think, 7.1 that's planned next year. They have certain they will try to make it like certain analysis, not only for this recording, but you compare it to a previous recording we have. So looking forward to that option. Anyway, so when you open your flight recorder from the outline listing here, you have the list of all available pages. Up to the environment is the default one, and if you have WebLogic and you're on an application of WebLogic, you can install the plugin, which is quite well maintained and had quite a lot of options. So you have it listed here, and you can use that for diagnostics. So regarding this, you get the let's go with the first one. That's memory. You have the listing or everything that's present inside your memory during the recording. You can then see here which classes are initializes, how much of instances are there, and the allocation inside the memory, etc. You have some neat graphs here also for that. And one of the best parts for this analysis is you can actually select certain period of time and then just focus on that. If you right-click it there, and you can store a set as focus selection, so it only then shows inside the tab what's related for this period, or you can go back and just select, or you just select certain class and say I want to focus on that class, and inside the other pages you can just then focus like inside the method profiling, where you see the list of methods that your application uses mostly. You can then just say, okay, I have the full listing of it, just focus on the certain selection. Let's say, okay, for the time frame that we selected, as we can see, it didn't record any package usage. So one of the things that you need to consider is when it's sampling for certain periods that you configured, so you might miss certain items. Okay, so besides memory, you have also very useful log instances. We'll show you certain classes that had certain logs, and as you can see, my class that I intentionally make the synchronized is present here, and the blockage time is present here. So if you notice something that's if you notice certain counting here that's too much, way more than you expected, then you can focus on fixing that. Also, you have, if you are working with the files, or of course if you are working with certain web servers, you have these pages that will show you duration of connections, either to file or for external resource, either incoming or outgoing resources. And of course, you have the listing of the exceptions happened during the monitoring. So if you notice something that's happened too much, you can also focus on that. Of course, as I mentioned, you can always like select what you want to monitor, and then inside the other pages you can see what's related to that. And at the end, there's this thread dump that can be monitored here. One thing that's different from the version 5, Oracle decided to drop certain features because I guess they were a little bit buggy and didn't have time to prepare finish. So regarding threads, I recommend using JMC version 5.5 or 5.6, since it has much better view. They announced that they will introduce back full functionalities inside the version 7. So looking forward for that one. And beside this, beside the recording of your application, you have the other things like monitoring the JVM and this the server itself by environment. Also, if you want to go over your over your heap. You can also do the heap dump. That one is located under the hotspot diagnostics. You have here the dump heap. You could just give the name of the file you want to dump it and allocate everything, and running it will create full heap dump. So you have also very useful plugin for that, which you can find on the server. So we are only left for like half a minute. So if anyone has a question, I mean, this was just quite quickly overview, and you can always ask me either here, I will be present here around, or you can contact me on any social network with a question. Yes?
How many people still work on the tool since it became open source?
To be honest, I'm not familiar. I guess everybody can join that team. I'm not sure how many people are there. But if you follow the Oracle guidance for the contributors, you can join them. But I'm not familiar how many people are right now there.
You are not a developer?
No, I'm not. Yes?
Do the extra flags actually expose something to use in a EMC?
Sorry, I didn't hear. So sorry, I can. If you can come down, and I can show you. We can then discuss. I didn't quite catch the question, so well, I guess that's it. Since my time is up, thank you very much, and see you around.